Have comments, additions, subtractions, errors? Hearing no objection, those are approved by unanimous consent. We have two public hearings. The first is Nantucket Gourmet, request for relief from a fine associated with a late license. Richard, would you give us the background before I open it?
Yes. This is a request for relief from a fine associated with a late filing fee. We require that all licenses be updated prior to January 1st. That did not occur in this instance. The owner of the business is here to represent his business, and my recommendation, as is always in these situations, is to not waive the fine.
All right, the public hearing is open. Do we have any comments on this relief request? Please, come forward, identify yourself, and speak.
Michael Fleischute, owner of Nantucket Gourmet. Back in the fall, I decided to cease the operations of our deli at the store, food service, and when the renewal of my common victualer's license came around, I had called the administrative office at the time to say at that point that I wasn't going to be renewing the common victualer's license, that I was going to focus primarily on retail only, and that at that point I would need to pursue further license, not knowing that the retail of packaged food wasn't included in that. I was not of that understanding at all, did not understand that that was included in the victualer's license for serving food, and that a separate license would be needed to continue with that food portion of my business, which is a very small portion. My focus was to focus on the hardware, the pots and pans and that kind of stuff that we sell, and get away from food service. The items in question are things like salts and spices and the local DeMarco sauce, things like that, that I predominantly, during this time of year, sell over the internet. So I'm shipping most of that, and the fine in this case represents many, many, many times what I actually sold during those couple of days. I would like to say that I did, as soon as I understood the situation, immediately close the doors, turn off the lights, and remedy the situation by pursuing the license and the inspection, which I was already in compliance with because the deli had been in compliance right up to the end of the year. All of this together, I think that the fine seems quite excessive for this instance. If not complete relief, maybe a reduced fine, because like I said, this represents considerably more than I even sold during that time period.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any questions from the board to the owner? Does the board need any more information?
You knew you had to have a permit to sell the food.
No, that I did not know. I knew I had to have a permit to serve food, but did not understand that things like prepackaged things, like I said, like the DeMarco sauce or the Nantucket.
Did you sell prepackaged things before you had the sandwich shop?
Yes, when we had the sandwich shop.
Did you get a permit for that?
I was told after the fact that that license was part of my food service license, that selling those things was covered by that. Richard explained.
No, my question was, before you had the sandwiches in the back, did you pay for a license to sell the prepackaged?
Prior to that, that was not my business at the time. I took over 4 years ago. So whoever created the deli a decade or more ago must have done that. The only license I've ever had was the license for serving food.
All right. Any more information required from the board? May I have a motion then to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second? No seconds? Aye. Any further discussion? All in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Discussion from the board. What is your pleasure? Quiet.
It seems to me like maybe it was a little bit of an honest mistake and maybe a reduced fine instead of the 4 times. I mean, I'd be acceptable with that.
Well, my question is, did anyone know that before the sandwich shop was there and they sell prepackaged foods, they needed that permit?
It is and always has been the responsibility of the property owner to obtain the appropriate licenses for the business. And it has always been a food service license and a retail food store license. There's always been 2 licenses associated with the business.
So it's always been 2 licenses,
Yes.
and you gave up 1, so you still needed the other
It
one.
has been 2 then for the 4 years. No.
It's only ever been one.
No, are you talking one piece of paper or one, or because
There's
you,
only one piece of paper, one license fee. I've only ever received paperwork to renew a common victualer's license,
that's the town, that's something we don't do.
but to the food service. So the only thing that I've ever been inspected, I've had inspected is my kitchen for where we've done the food service.
Part of that inspection also encompasses the retail food store.
Correct. But at least the area is in compliance as well.
All right. Pleasure of the board. You had a proposal. I mean, I understand the problem of an honest mistake, but we still have to enforce the regulations or we set bad precedent, so that's my opinion.
I make a motion that we enforce the fine.
Do you want to reduce the fine, or?
No, I'm good. with
Okay.
this.
Motion's been made to enforce the fine. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Chairman votes aye. And the motion's been denied. Request has been denied. We have another one, Nantucket Wine and Spirits, relief from a fine associated with late license.
This is a tobacco sales permit issued every year to those establishments that sell tobacco products. This is a license that's been traditionally issued to this establishment on a yearly basis. I will tell you that this is the second time that there has been a request to alleviate to remove the fine because it was not time sensitively approved last year also.
Okay, public hearing is now open on the discussion for Nantucket Wine and Spirits. Do we have anyone speaking for or against? Well, that's okay. Then, you have a comment?
I have one comment. I didn't understand it, Richard said. It sounded like they didn't get the bill in time, or they didn't pay the bill in time. Which one was it?
They did not pay in time. The license has to be paid for and obtained prior to the end of December 2013 in this case. That was not done.
Any more comments? May I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
Further discussion? All in favor of closing the public hearing? Public hearing is closed. Pleasure of the board.
I think we have to follow through.
May I have a motion?
Second.
You move?
Yeah,
She-
move it.
You second? Any further discussion? All in favor of rejecting the request for relief, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. The relief will not be granted. Okay. Dr. Telford.
Thank you. Today we have with us Dr. Sam Talford from the Tufts Medical School. He is a preeminent tick specialist and tick-borne disease specialist, and the board asked for a presentation on activities on Martha's Vineyard and activities here and what can be done as a joint effort. Sam, take it away.
Sam, welcome back.
Thank you, Malcolm, members of the board and public. This grew out of an email discussion that we had. We've been sort of forwarding emails from a deer management e-list for New England, and some issues have come up. I've been involved. This will be my 30th year of working on ticks on Nantucket. It's my 20th year of working on Martha's Vineyard on ticks there. And interestingly, the vineyard in the last 3 years has undertaken a very ambitious program to reduce the incidence of Lyme disease there. So what I'd like to do today is update you on our progress over there, mainly as trying to stimulate you to do the same yourselves. And I'd like to remind people that when we talk about doing something about Lyme disease and the other tick-borne infections, you really have to define your goals. A lot of people think in terms of eradication, that is bringing incidence to zero or zero risk. There is no way to do that. It's here to stay. All we can do is reduce the incidence, reduce risk. It'd be nice to reduce it 99%. I think that's unattainable. It'd be nice to reduce it 80 or 90%. It'd be even nice to reduce it 20%. That is, if you have 100 cases a year being officially confirmed by the Department of Public Health, it'd be nice if it were only 80 cases a year. So there are things that, and how you approach those goals differ. So you really need to define your goals first. The whole idea of suppressing transmission versus controlling transmission. How do you keep the level of transmission down as opposed to controlling it to try to bring about risk reduction. Short-term and long-term strategies, I think, is where people really get confused. When in the past I've been involved out here, we've had long-term strategies in mind. That is, to return Nantucket to what it was before the 1970s, when there was no tick-borne infection here. And the only way to do that would be habitat management, and we're not going to put a match to Alter Rock in April and let it burn, which might accomplish that goal. We're not going to stop people from using their property, building houses, and enjoying the landscape, but we sure can do something about deer. And that's where the discussion of deer reduction came in, was a long-term strategy to bring the deer density back down to what it was before the 1970s when you had a problem. And everybody got bogged down on that because they thought that this was the final solution. No one had to do anything else. That's not true. In the interim, while we're waiting for this long-term solution to take hold, that is, it might take 10 years. If we were to kill all the deer tomorrow, it would take 10 years before we saw a significant reduction in risk out here. But it would be a sustainable risk reduction. That is, our grandchildren would thank us for doing it. But in the interim, we need to do short-term things. We need to educate the public about personal protection to try to prevent tick bites, educate physicians to diagnose cases in a prompt fashion and treat accordingly. And so short-term and long-term goals are important, and to set those out in advance. And like I said, the different targets have different strategies. And obviously, your level of commitment and the amount of resources that you need differ depending upon what your goal is. So Martha's Vineyard has been quite concerned about Lyme disease, just like Nantucket. And 3 years ago, a member of the Tisbury Board of Health, Mike Loberg, was once executive vice president of Bristol-Myers Squibb. Very effective guy who approached the All-Island Selectmen and asked for a commitment, saying, if we can make some recommendations, will you stand behind us and support us? And then, so he got the Board of Selectmen to assign a resolution saying that encourages the All-Island Boards of Health to work together to reduce the incidence and severity of tick-borne illness. And so with this in mind, Michael applied for a community improvement grant through the Martha's Vineyard Hospital. Apparently it's mandated by the state and typically have been doled out in smaller numbers over the years. and he went for a large 5-year grant of $250,000. And so he got this. He got the buy-in of a number of stakeholders on island, as well as people like me. He and Matt Poole. Matt is the co-chair of the whole initiative and is on the Edmonton Board of Health. They have a goal to reduce the incidence of Lyme disease by 75% by delivering a set of recommendations to the Board of Selectmen in year 4 or year 5 of the project. And that's what we've been working towards, is this set of recommendations. There's a medical education, there are 2 arms to this: the medical education committee, people working with the hospital and with healthcare providers on the island to improve diagnosis and treatment and educate physicians on that. And the other is the environmental committee. Matt Poole and I are the chairs of the environmental committee. And I'll be speaking mostly about what the environmental committee has been doing. Michael's big idea was that this has to be locally branded. That is, it's all very well and good to put on your town website a link to the Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station, a link to the CDC, a link to the University of Rhode Island, all of whom have good websites. But it's another thing to have local experts, people everybody sees in the Stop and Shop, to be on a video saying this is what you need to do. Can you imagine Tim Lepre in a video on YouTube that anyone can access from a phone saying this is how you remove a tick and this is what you do to watch for signs and symptoms? And that's what they've done. They developed a website and content de novo. It's used local experts. They've got honorary local experts like myself. They figured I've been coming out for 20 years and therefore I'm a familiar face, even though I try to hide. Education is the primary focus of this initiative, and they've been able to get into the schools and deliver messages about prevention to elementary school, and they're just starting a middle school and high school initiative this spring. So they've got the buy-in from the education system there. And then finally educate the residents, and what we'd like to do eventually is deliver the content to every single household. The research is directed at any research that is done. Now, a lot of people say, oh, you need to do some more research. I do a lot of research. I say baloney. We don't need any more research. We need action. We need to spend the money to act. And so any research that we do out there is directed to supporting local recommendations. That is, how do we adapt things that we know from general knowledge and apply it directly on Martha's Vineyard? So this is their website. I encourage everybody to go on, and all of those are videos that were produced. They're 3-minute videos, and they cover a range of topics on the infections themselves, the use of Promethean-treated clothing. I'm the guy speaking on the tick life cycle, which is central to our understanding of risk, and so forth. Even a video on pet protection, because of course today our pets are like our family. They're not just pets. And a new one, hunter safety. All of this is there for anybody to tap into, and they've got a presence on Facebook as well. And all of that was created by using a local company, spending some of that grant money. In fact, about 1/3 of that grant money goes to supporting the web, to making content and supporting that website. So the money stays on island. One of the interesting things Michael did was to spend about $15 grand to tap into a database of provider and pharmaceutical information and come up with an estimate of how much so-called underreporting there is on the island. Martha's Vineyard, typically the DPH will count anywhere from 100 to 200 cases a year of Lyme disease from Martha's Vineyard. Well, if you look at the doxycycline prescriptions that are issued out there for the last 3 years, for 2010, 11, and 12, it's actually more like 2,000 patients a summer are getting doxycycline, presumably for a tick-borne infection. Of course, you use doxycycline for other things, but nonetheless, that peak in the summer that you see is due to tick-borne infection. So that tells us how much Lyme disease really is out there. That's about the extent of research we need. Even if it weren't 2,000, it was just 200, we have a problem and we need to do something about it. We don't need to do anything other than recognize that. interestingly, this led to the idea, and one of the recommendations supported by the CDC based upon peer-reviewed information is that 2 tablets of doxycycline, 2 100-milligram tablets taken within 72 hours of a tick bite will greatly reduce your risk of getting Lyme disease. So Dr. Jacobs, who runs a walk-in clinic on Martha's Vineyard and has done so for a long, long time, now you'll see he has a tick bite fast track. There's no waiting. You say you have a tick bite, you get seen right away, you get your 2 pills, and you leave. And we were hoping that that's going to make a big difference in terms of reducing risk, at least for Lyme disease. Sadly, we don't know whether that works for anaplasmosis. We know it doesn't work for babesiosis, and we think it probably would work for the new infection, Borrelia miyamotoi disease. So there's something that came out of this idea of looking at doxycycline use. Something that Michael was very interested in was knowing that I had access. My freezer is very deep. I started working on Lyme disease in 1984, and took with me the blood samples that we had collected from Noshawn Island in 1985 and 1986 as part of a risk study. He said, well, Noshawn has decreased their deer population from 300 to maybe 30 to 50 animals. Surely we would see some reduction in risk over that time. So I went out and I bled people on Noshawn in 2011. Oh wait, this is Chappaquiddick. We'll get back to that. The Chappaquiddick survey, we ran a survey of residents of Chappaquiddick. We were going to use Chappaquiddick as a experimental focus because it's an island. It's constrained. It's actually separate from Martha's Vineyard. Administered a survey, and we got results which are very much in line with what we see everywhere else. About 15% of the people had antibody to Lyme disease, and this is about the same out here. A published study shows about 15%. We looked at about 4,000 samples out here during the early 1990s and came up with about 18%. So it's all about the same. The risk is the same. And we had them answer a questionnaire, and most felt that tick-borne infections were a concern, but they spend very little money, about $75 per family on tick control. And interestingly, a majority thought that the town or county should pay for tick control. And in fact, some went as far to say is the town, we asked for this because we wanted to see whether there was support in this. They supported raising taxes for this purpose with a median family increase of $100 to be acceptable. That's really valuable information for us in terms of trying to sustain what we want to do out there. 44% supported Board of Health regulations mandating that the homeowner undertake tick control, which is a really interesting idea. Right now, with West Nile virus, certain urban centers have recognized that in the foreclosure debacle, we have properties out there with swimming pools and other things that are being neglected. And so what they've done is have local ordinances that said you must not harbor a pest. That is, you must not have these sites for breeding mosquitoes. The owner of the property must keep it clean so that we don't have increased risk of West Nile virus. There's no reason why we can't have that same sort of attitude with respect to a Board of Health local ordinance. Deer reduction was actually supported by about 60% of the respondents. The Chappie people are kind of interesting. They're sort of like what you could imagine people on Muskeget would be like if they lived out in Muskeget. They're very independent. And in fact, some of the people even expressed the fact, we don't care about Lyme disease. And they were the 10% that responded against this. We've been doing yard surveys out there as a means of educating the homeowners. Some of you may remember Dick Johnson, who was the Cotuh Ranger for the Conservation Foundation. Dick was head of Sheriff's Meadow for a long time out there, is a biologist. He's got a master's in marine biology, and left Sheriff's Meadow and has been underemployed out there, working as a substitute high school teacher. And so he's been my hands out there. Even though about 1/6 of the budget is allocated for my expenses each year, I leave most of that out there to pay Dick to do this work. That is, he goes out with this questionnaire that I came up with and surveys individual yards and collects ticks. And what we've done with this information is determined that the yard score, we have a way of scoring these yards for risk, is very reflective of the density of ticks. That is, of the ticks that have yards. Now, there are a lot of yards with high scores that don't have ticks at all, and we're trying to, those are the interesting ones. We need to analyze that data, look and see, what are these guys doing to make their yard less acceptable to ticks? But if you look, the yard scores in Chilmark are much greater than that in Chappie, and that coincides with what we know about how many ticks are out there. And in fact, the median number of ticks out on Chilmark is 6 or 7 per yard versus 2 or 3 on Chappaquiddick. And that's reflected in the yard score. So we're trying to develop this tool that people can use to evaluate their risk. In addition, what we do is evaluate the yards. Those people who have yards in the top quartile, that is the 25% most risky scores, Dick takes pictures of all of these yards and he sends them to me, and I sit there and I look them over and I write down what I see as a problem. And then I write him a letter, a personal letter saying, I find this, and this to be wrong, please remedy it. And I'm running this as an experiment to see, in the face of specific recommendations that are tailored at the individual yard level, will people act on the information? But sadly, I don't think that's going to happen. Nonetheless, you look at this and you go, well, what's wrong with that yard? Well, there's a wood pile there, which is good for the rodents that serve as host of the ticks. There's vegetation right at the entrance of the home, and then there's a bird feeder, which is dropping birds are dropping ticks right into a place where the ticks can survive. If you had the bird feeder out 3 feet on the lawn, in the middle of the elements, the ticks that drop would be more likely to die. And so those are the kinds of recommendations that I make in these letters, and then mail them out in May when people come and open up their homes, and hope that that fresh information will be acted upon. Deer have been a main focus. I ran the first deer reduction experiment as a graduate student. I still am convinced that deer reduction is the way to go as a long-term solution. However, I have been beaten up periodically through the years and have not succeeded in having a big program deer reduction anywhere. Out here on Nantucket, as on the vineyard, as on Nantucket, there's a pushback from hunters about deer density. That is, deer numbers, there couldn't possibly be that many deer. What we've done is, as Nantucket did last year, do an aerial flyover, infrared flyover, to count the deer, and interestingly, the numbers were exactly what Mass Wildlife says they are by their harvest model. And not only that, because science is based upon replication of results, we flew out there again 2 weeks ago to see whether the numbers have changed and to see whether the hot spots that we identified with that flyover are still the same. And you'll see why that's important in a minute. The other thing is, well, deer hunters aren't going to shoot more animals than they can use. It takes, we can't afford to pay someone to butcher them. We can't cut them up ourselves. We can't use the venison. Well, we're subsidizing butchery costs out there to the tune of $100 per animal for anyone who brings a deer in. So these are the kinds of things that we're doing right now, and we're exploring bringing a meat locker to Martha's Vineyard because there's a buy-in from the local agriculture community. They need a place. They have to send their livestock off island, their sheep, their goats, their chickens, everything else off island to be butchered and come back on the boat. That's a lot of money. So there should be some way to develop a community resource in terms of a meat locker, which could be used during deer season to promote the use of venison. I mumbled something about the Noshawn survey. We bled people in Noshawn in 1985. 21% of them were positive for Lyme at that time. In 2011, 13% were positive for Lyme. This is deer going from 300 on the island to 30 to 50 on the island. However, statistically, these so-called 95% confidence intervals overlap. That is, there's no statistical difference between 21% and 13%. However, in 1985, the Forbes family who live in Milton and places like that, there was no Lyme disease in Milton. Now, Milton is one of the hottest spots in Massachusetts. So we're confounding our results on Noshan, assuming they got infected on Noshan, when in fact they probably got infected near their homes in Milton, and that's why we don't see the statistical difference. So there is good data to support the idea of risk reduction due to deer reduction. The local conservation people are buying in because places like the Polyhill Arboretum are losing valuable plants because of deer browse. So they're being a fantastic ally for us. And interestingly, the yard surveys, when homeowners are present, we ask them, how often do you see deer? And when you do a multiple regression analysis of all of those 20, 30 variables, the three that come out to be the most predictive of tick density are deciduous tree cover as opposed to conifers, amount of leaf litter, and how often deer are seen. The leaf litter is critical because that's where the ticks hide from the elements. They dry out very quickly without leaf litter. And that leads us to a very specific recommendation for homeowners. Get rid of the leaf litter around your homes. So to come back to the infrared aerial count, this is the kind of data you get. And in fact, some of you probably have seen this for Nantucket from last year. And what we've done is do GIS analysis and made maps so that we can identify where the hot spots are. Where are the deer spending a lot of their time during the winter? May not be the same as where they're spending time in the summer, but we don't care about where they're spending time in the summer. We care about when they are around in October through May, because that's when the adult ticks are feeding on them, and that's where one female tick feeding on a deer could produce 2,000 eggs. That's the time to hit them. So if we identify hot spots, those black areas, we can go to the homeowners or the property owners and say, look, your thing, and if it pans out from 2 weeks ago that these are the same hot spots as we saw the year before, we have good evidence to go to these people and say, you must do something. You must open up your land to reduce deer, or you must do something about it. And we'll come back to that at the end. What else is there that you can do? What we'd like to recommend to the Board of Selectmen in the future, maybe next year, a standardized approach to diagnosis and treatment. This is being complicated because of the buyouts of the hospitals. Both hospitals by Mass General, they have made some proclamations about not using specific laboratories for testing. The tick-borne disease testing done by Imogen was a great service for Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard over the years, because anytime a Lyme disease request came in, they were automatically tested for babesiosis and anaplasmosis, and our detection rates for babesia and anaplasmosis went tremendously different. Now they can't use the Imogen laboratories. Point of information, I am a scientific advisor for Imogen. But that doesn't mean I'm trying to get you to use their stuff. There are other laboratories you can use for that as well. Educating short-term practitioners, as I understand it, you get a lot of short-term physicians coming in to man the emergency room during the summer. They all need to be educated the moment they get here and reinforce that they can be just like Tim Lepre, and they can smell Lyme disease a mile away. We need to educate about preventing tick bites. All residents, all visitors need to know, watch for ticks, use repellent, use Promethean-treated clothing if you can, do a tick check, remove a tick promptly, seek medical attention if you have any signs or symptoms a week afterwards. I want to establish a tick czar out there, someone who will dedicate his or her life to this, not someone who's already doing stuff and could do this as something else. We need someone to dedicate to this and to develop a nonprofit organization which would allow for fundraising so that this can be perpetuated. the certain amount of money is going to be required. We need to carry out targeted deer density reduction by increasing hunter access to private property. Some of that might be carried out by number 7 there, which is to think about a no harboring of pest ordinance. On the other hand, as the 2 articles that we had in discussion here when we first started, what ordinance, what force do we have to enforce the ordinance? Can we fine them? Who does the inspection? Who decides that there's a pest being harbored? Nonetheless, we're hoping that peer pressure will get people to open up properties. And then finally, to use the existing framework that we have for deer management in Massachusetts, that is hunting season, to increase the harvest and use of venison. There's been some talk out there, not just here, but elsewhere in the country, about going back to market hunting, having a short market season and selling venison. Can you imagine what Nantucket venison would sell for in the restaurants here? So there are things that could be done for the future, and some of those will be on our recommendations. And so finally, I want to remind you all about the Tick Management Handbook. It's free. It's, I don't know what it is. It's 100, 120 pages long. It tells you everything you need to know about reducing your risk for Lyme disease. It's available online as a PDF from the Connecticut Agriculture Experiment Station. Just Google Tick Management Handbook. Some of you have seen this before. I remind people that at the level of the individual, you have repellents, such as DEET, works just fine for ticks. You have toxicants that you apply to your clothing. It's not going to hurt you to get it on your skin. It's the same thing, in fact, at a lower concentration than as what is in head louse shampoo for kids. And you leave that on your kid for 10 or 15 minutes. Appropriate clothing. I look like an idiot, but I've never gotten Lyme disease. Some of it, I think, is due to the fact that I tuck my trouser legs into my socks. Now, that's an unrealistic recommendation. That is not a locally adapted recommendation. During the summer, what idiot is going to be in long pants? They're going to be in shorts. So that one's not terribly practical, but nonetheless, it's available for people who want to take advantage of it. Tick check is so important. Feel yourself for ticks. The little shower hangers have been reprinted out on the vineyard and mailed out to every single place that might host visitors. Education and awareness is what we're trying to promote. Habitat avoidance if you're immunocompromised, if you have a malignancy, you're on chemotherapy, if you have HIV, stay on the beach. Don't go out into the moors. Things like that. Source reduction around homes. Get rid of leaf litter around the homes. So those are things that can be done at the individual level. And all of it is due to this understanding of the life cycle of the tick. Nymphs are around April through July. They're the most risky. They're small. You never see them. The people who get Lyme disease very, very rarely see the tick that bit them and gave them Lyme disease, which is why tick testing is silly. You got the one, you test that one, but it's probably another one that's going to give it to you. And besides, a physician is not going to make a decision for treatment based upon tick testing. Adult ticks can transmit, but they count for very few cases because people are dressed differently during the fall. They're wearing long pants. It's colder. And so that really does help. They get on your pants and they brush off as you're walking along. 2-year life cycle means that any given day they're in active stages hiding somewhere. That means if you're doing something like spraying, you need to do it multiple times a year. You need to do it during the adult season, you need to do it during nymphal season, you need to do it during larval season. There's no one application kills everything. There may be delayed influences. If you use tick tubes and put them out in August, you're not going to see that the adult ticks in October are gone. You're going to see that the nymphal ticks the next year are fewer because you killed the larvae that would have turned into nymphs. That's a hard concept to sell to people, but education is the only way we can do it. And remember, killing 2,000 larvae. So people who say, well, you should attack the mice. remember that it's the deer that are the reproductive host. The female tick feeds on large animals, dogs through deer, and if you prevent one female tick from feeding, that's 2,000 potential offspring. So if you kill 2,000 offspring, that's compensated for by the successful feeding of one tick on a deer. So remember that when you think about modes of intervention at the level of communities. Habitat management, you clear up brush so their survival is reduced, they dry out. Desiccants, you can put down mulch, you can put down stone, find some way to just keep the elements beating down on the yard. It's not the grass, it's the perimeter of the yard that's important. Education and awareness, always important for people to be explained why they need to do these things. Spraying is not a dirty word, and we'll come back to that in my final 2 slides. Post-targeted acaricides, the floor poster, applying permethrin or some other compound to deer. We'll mention that in a minute. Deer reduction, as I've talked about. A new product is being used now by a lot of pesticide applicators called spinosad. It's actually a biopesticide. This is organically, it's non-synthetic, so the National Organic Standards Board permits it. And there's growing evidence that spinosad is lethal to ticks. And so this is something that could be considered for spray applications out here. And so stay tuned to that. That is something that I predict we're going to be able to use more and more in places like this. We talked about deer reduction. Oddly enough, Block Island next week will start a cull of 200 deer by a company called White Buffalo. They've had, in the last several weeks, a off-season hunt on Block Island, realizing that they have too many deer out there. This is after 20 years. We started work out there 20 years ago on this. Whether this actually goes through and they don't have an injunction against them stopping it at the last minute is not clear. But this proves to me that there is a limit that communities will tolerate, and they will take the action that is considered so extreme. On the other hand, we've had a setback. Eastern Long Island has had planned to have the removal of about 2,000 deer by the USDA because of crop damage. And they've been stopped by threats of lawsuits, and the town of East Hampton has withdrawn its support for the USDA coming in and removing 2,000 deer. So with one hand, there's some optimism that people have said enough is enough, and we want to do something about it, but on the other hand, there are others that don't. And in fact, Cayuga Heights in Ithaca, New York, right next to Cornell, has had a problem with deer for a long time. And this comment came up last week on the Deer Management E-List, and I thought it was so interesting because it's the sort of thing that I've come to a realization about, having been beaten over the head so many times about deer reduction. What they're doing now, instead of killing deer, is to actually capture does and spay them. Veterinarians are spaying deer at the cost of $3,000 per deer. Tony DiNicola runs White Buffalo. White Buffalo is the company that is going to be shooting deer on Block Island, charging about $650 a deer. But what they do is they guarantee one shot, one kill. A team comes in, butchers the animals, and delivers the meat to soup kitchens. And usually, no one even knows they're there. Tony has a PhD in wildlife biology, was a Special Forces Marine, and has a night scope on his AR-15. Sadly, though, Rhode Island has decreed that he can't use a suppressor on his rifle, which meant that he could have done this completely silently. But he also realizes that there's no legal method available to Cayuga Heights to reduce deer by hunting. It's illegal to trap deer, so they can't even trap and euthanize them. So he's arguing this is the only option that they came up with. It's better than doing nothing. They've been doing nothing for over a decade, and the problem has not resolved itself. So if lethal options are off the table for legal or logistical reasons, what else is there to do? You do whatever you need to do. Just start doing something. And that's, I love this comment. Interestingly, Tony's also benefiting from this, from $3,000 per deer to his company. But nonetheless, I thought this, Tony has been one of the biggest detractors of the four-poster method, saying that this will never work and so forth. And he's come around to the idea of pragmatic public health, that there's some things people will tolerate. It's just a local environment that determines what your set of options are. And I've come around as well on the four-poster. That is, my pragmatism leads me based upon peer-reviewed publications showing that four-posters do indeed work. They do reduce the number of ticks that are out there. Therefore, we need to try to use them if we need to. I'm no longer in that camp of no, absolutely not, never. I still point out what they point out in their paper, which is it's going to run you about $50 per hectare per year, but that's based upon a wage of about $9 an hour, and we know that doesn't work out here on Nantucket. So it's going to cost a lot more than $50 per hectare per year to run four-posters. If we even suggest that, maybe a third of the hectares on Nantucket get four-posters, you're still talking $250,000 a year in perpetuity. Once they stopped, the percent reduction, the last bar there on the graph, they stopped the four-poster, the ticks came right back. But it does work. So I'm telling you, there are things that can be done. It just takes effort, it takes commitment, it takes someone like Mike Loberg over on the vineyard to get things going and really get start some action. And I want to leave you with a provocative, I want to try to provoke action, and at the risk of being declared a persona non grata here on Nantucket, it's an interesting analogy. The Vineyard high school football team kicks Nantucket's butt every year. They're also kicking your butt on Lyme disease. Shame on you. So we're happy to entertain questions.
Thank you. Questions for Sam?
Richard.
Sam, what does Mass Food and Drug say about the ability to retail venison?
You cannot.
I know, I agree.
At
And
this moment.
do you feel that there is any indication that that posture is softening?
It would take legislative pressure. That is what our state reps are for. The state Department of Public Health, Alca Maria, says he has nothing against the idea. However, Massachusetts has adopted federal meat inspection guidelines, not guidelines, regulations. And the thing that keeps us from being able to sell deer meat is the fact that USDA and FDA must be allowed to inspect the site of killing. For hunting, that's impossible.
Right.
But why on earth can't we have that change? That's what our legislators are for. And the reason I think that can be changed is because the reason this line of reasoning came to me years ago was I was in a fancy restaurant on the top of Atlanta. Drug company reps were entertaining us, and I had some nice Scottish grouse, and I chomped down and nearly broke a tooth on a shotgun pellet. And I'm going, what, we can import animals killed in the field by hunters to be sold in our restaurants here, but we can't do the same here? So there must be some loophole there. Why can't we find some legislator who will push that in the Farm Bill?
Sam,
Yes.
my only other question is, we get a lot of what I'm referring to as sort of a colloquial pushback here, not so much from the hunting populace, but from those individuals who simply feel that this is the most beautiful animal in the world and should not be harmed in any manner, way, shape, or form. And we really hear that a lot.
And that's why it's a pragmatic public health. But
Vin, you got the same issue?
for you not to be on the hook for 50 to 100 bucks per hectare for foreclosures, you have your ordinance written so that if you don't open your land to access and you want to protect the deer, you make them less harmful to the environment. You pay for the foreclosures. I don't see what's wrong with that.
Nor do I, but there are a lot of people who will.
But that's interesting, because one of the things we've talked about is better access for hunters, and we've had a couple discussions with hunters.
Yeah,
and-
although you're very lucky here. I mean, 40% of your land is open. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of hunting area here. But you're right, but during hunting season, you're smart. They go into people's backyards.
Well, after the first week, they all
Yeah.
go to shelter, essentially.
That's a known fact. I mean, these are not stupid animals. They understand when the hunting season is, and they literally leave huntable property and invade and inhabit those areas that is prohibited for hunting. I mean,
And that's something that we need to work on. As a member of the Lyme Disease Commission, Governor's Lyme Disease Commission, our report last year specified that Mass Wildlife needs to consider reducing the archery setback from 500 feet to 150 feet to open up more property for hunting by archers. Mass Wildlife has not acted on that. There is a bill before the House right now on Sunday hunting, because in this economy, people cannot afford to take time off to hunt. That's a good bill, but I think the 150-foot setback is a better one.
I've also been told that that particular bill for Sunday hunting has been in the legislature every year for 30 years and has gone nowhere.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked exploring of actually trying to get at least Sunday hunting here, which will be a challenge.
But maybe there's some way to work with law enforcement and have a different a change in local regs to change your setback for archers.
My disappointment today is that one of our board members is also the chairman of the Board of Selectmen and is not here today due to an illness. We also have missed one of our ardent hunting enthusiasts who is also a member of the board. I'm sorry they weren't here to hear this.
Well, look, when you told me, do you have time to come down and speak to us, I said, absolutely. Anytime you want me to address the public, answer questions, I'm here.
That's what I wanted to hear.
I've been working out here for 30 years. I want to see something done out here.
Thank you.
It's disgraceful that
Well.
I've been working for 30 years and I can't point to Nantucket as a success.
I agree with you. We've made some small steps, but we have a long ways to go. Which reminds me, Richard, what about our advertisement and our video? I haven't seen that.
Nor have I.
I was
And I have no other information.
I was really hoping that our selectman chairman would be here so we could perhaps put some pressure on the
was I.
town. Sam, we have a great proposal for a very, very professional educational video. Much better than Martha's Vineyard, much more professionally done.
I like to hear that. Now I've got competitive.
Yeah, no, wait, we're dealing with a little bureaucracy on getting it all funded, but it will really be something special. And I don't know if I sent you the numbers. We had an intern last summer who was hired to really track disease, and we had 420 cases of confirmed or suspected of various diseases. And based what we could figure, although it's the first year I think we really had true, well, close to true numbers, let's put it that way, was that babesiosis seems to be going up and anaplasmosis seems to be going down for whatever reason.
That varies.
Yeah, but I'm quite happy that I'm more comfortable with those numbers than I've seen in the past. That's a lot, 400 plus.
But imagine, if you will, there is still a doxycycline shortage. Can you imagine if there weren't antibiotics?
Yeah.
How many more cases there would be?
We actually did track that too last year. Did I send you those pharmacy numbers? And they were, I'll send them to you. They were higher than the 400.
I'm sure they were.
They were closer to about 600 we tracked antibiotics potentially for all 3 diseases, and it was,
No, and, you know, DPH for some reason doesn't count all the cases that are reported. I'm still trying to get to the bottom of that. But it doesn't matter. We know we have a problem.
Yeah,
whether
it does.
it's 100 or 500 or 1,000.
Right.
And it's time to.
so we collected them as suspected or confirmed, because the confirmed cases, there's only about 2 of them. Yeah.
Very strange.
Very strange. Well, listen, thank you, and I'm very interested in that information you had on landscape management of the 3 keys, because we can put that in our video.
Yes, yes. And if you do find someone who can come up with some money to hire some local person who can do what Dick Johnson has done for yard surveys, it'd be nice to do the same for select neighborhoods here.
Terrific. Really, thank you, and we will catch up and surpass Martha's Vineyard. All right, we have 2 public hearings coming up. One is draft regulation 56, which deals with wastewater flow limitations within Hummock Pond Watershed Protection District.
Yes.
This is an issue we've discussed 2 or 3 times at the board, and 2 weeks ago we had a presentation from the Massachusetts Estuary Project, which, remember at our last meeting, we discussed that this report was in draft form, but now I think it's final draft
Yes,
form.
yes.
You want to lay the background for this again before we open the public hearing?
Sure. As you are all aware, the Wannacomet Water Company has agreed to run municipal water out to the end of Hummock Pond Road. Any connections at that point on will be made by the residents in the area at their expense. However, there is a regulation within Title V which notes that if you have a septic system and a well on your property, as all of these properties do, you are a nitrogen-sensitive area. As a nitrogen-sensitive area, you must maintain 1 bedroom for every 10,000 square feet of floor area, of property area, limiting these buildings to a specific bedroom count. And once you bring municipal water out to properties, and there is no longer a well on the property, and the property still has a septic system, but a municipal water supply, the delineation of a nitrogen-sensitive area is lifted off of that property, and they can build that property out in a manner of bedroom counts to whatever they can fit on the property. So you can have a 40,000 square foot lot that currently has 4 bedrooms on it, and then run municipal water to it and have a 40,000 square foot lot that may have 8 or 10 bedrooms on it if you can fit them within the structure and you can get the septic system on the property. This does not bode particularly well, in my opinion, as the director of the health department for Hummock Pond, in the sense that the estuaries report is now complete for Hummock Pond. It has been determined that nutrient loading to Hummock Pond is primarily caused by in-ground septic systems. Fertilizer is not an issue in this particular watershed, or a minor issue, but nowhere near the issue that septic systems are.
Well, it's actually, there's atmospheric nitrogen. We're talking about
sorry.
local contribution.
Yes,
Yes.
phosphorus.
Is
This is a
sep- is
saltwater
septic
pond,
system, yeah.
so it's going to be, nitrogen. Now, if you look at the map on the wall, you've got a relatively dense area here of housing. You've got a secondary area here. You've got additional areas up here that have dense housing, and here, and to an extent down in this area here. Fortunately, on this side of the pond, there is virtually no contribution from septic systems at all. However, again, we do have contributions from here, here, and areas along this area here. The regulation that I am putting before the board today would stipulate that even with a municipal water connection to your property, you still cannot exceed 1 bedroom for every 10,000 square feet. This is a regulation that was promulgated a number of years ago in Nantucket to protect Hither Creek prior to any form of municipal sewer going to the area. The intent here is to try to protect Hummock Pond and north head of Hummock Pond until sewer is available to these properties, and then, obviously, with the arrival of sewer, build-out can occur to whatever is allowed per building code and zoning.
Thank you. Just to be clear, most of the nitrogen is atmospheric, but it's the nitrogen sources that we can control.
I'm sorry if I wasn't clear about
Yeah.
that. Yes, atmospheric deposition obviously contributes a majority of the nutrient
And
loading.
we can't control that.
And we cannot control that. The one things that we can, well, the number of things that we can control are runoff, septic system discharges, and fertilizer.
Right.
Those are the three big ones that we have to concern ourselves with.
Right.
Of those three, in this particular area, subsurface disposal of sewage seems to be the bigger nutrient generator.
And this was published in the paper in detail. So now the public hearing is open. If there are comments on Regulation 56, I would appreciate to hear them.
Yes, I'm here for that.
Well, please stand up and introduce yourself and make your comments.
My name's Marty McGowan. I live within Zone B. Is that correct? Zone B?
B.
I believe I might even have land in A. But it's hard to tell from this rendition.
I don't think so.
Is the farm in A?
Right here.
Millbrook Road.
Millbrook, you're on the right-hand side.
Yeah, I'm on the other side. So I'm all B.
Yeah, there's Dickey's
Okay.
property, and then you're right here. B.
Thank you. So, a couple of items. What would make the difference in a septic system in this particular application? If a septic system was separated, as in gray water versus sink water, and if I'm saying that, I'm not sure I'm saying that
Mhm.
correctly, but is that okay? Everybody's getting what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. If the septic systems that were in this area were, there was a incentive, let's say, for all areas, clients in the zone to react to that, just like throw out your tick pile of wood, whatever it is. If there was a difference in it, what difference would that make to your application, to your map? Because if most of it's coming from rain, you mind if I sit down?
Please.
What would that be? What difference would that make?
My concern there is what the build-out would be to the property. You certainly have a septic system on an existing piece of property that is contributing X amount of nutrient loading to the groundwater.
Right.
If you relieve that restriction and you use black water, gray water systems, but you increase the number of bedrooms for property, you may be negating the loss of nutrient loading, dependent upon how many bedrooms you have.
Acceptable situation. But let's say that we're working with accurate, knowledgeable data that you've used to come up with this map. We're talking about a black water, gray water situation now. And if you say to me, at my house, I have 50% black water and 50% gray water, then a gray water system would reduce the opportunity for deterioration by 50%. Now, that's my example. I'm looking to hear from you what a real example would be.
I wouldn't comment on that right now without having to find numbers and some science in front of me. I think black water, gray water systems are variable in nutrient reduction, and I think it also is much dependent upon soil conditions, percolation rates, things of that nature, seasonal issues. I think it's a fluctuating target that can't be determined for a specific extended time frame.
I'm sure there's a map that could be applied to anything, because to some degree, your septic system you've come up with a map for this. You've come up with a approach that says, okay, the septic systems are providing a percentage that we can control, I believe was the way that the opportunity for improvement lies with our ability for fertilizer, septic systems and, what was the other one?
Runoff.
And runoff. Runoff's a little tough.
Runoff's not an issue because there are very few hard surfaces other than roadways in that area.
So runoff isn't a major contributor.
No.
And so again, it sounds like you have done some significant homework to come up with this proposal. And I'm saying to you that if that homework was done, and you have some idea, and you obviously are the most knowledgeable person about gray and black water applications, even with soil analysis. I know for a fact that you have the soil analysis information available to you. I live there, I know what the soil is in my area, and what it takes to do a septic there, both types. But I'm interested in how we can move forward with a proposal to take a piece of property and say, okay, 10,000 feet, you can have a bedroom. And because of that, you're going to have a bedroom, you're going to have a toilet. The person's going to go 3 times a day, and we're going to have X amount of black water. I'm going to have X amount of gray water, and this amount is acceptable to go into Hummock Pond. Because that's what I'm hearing. That there's a certain amount that, with 10,000 feet, is acceptable for today. But when we add sewer or water to the system, then once we add sewer, let me put it this way, once we add sewer to the system, then we've taken the problem away from this area and we've moved it on. So I don't see the issue as being about 10,000 feet.
Well, actually, the amount of nitrogen going from septic systems or anything is not acceptable. I mean, we can't say it's acceptable. The point is it's not acceptable now.
I'm glad that you said that.
So the concept is to find ways that we can now, today, not next year or 10 years from now, and find a ways to make sure it doesn't get worse. That's essentially what we have to do here. And this is one thing we can do. I mean, the people who put this report talked about opening up the pond to the water a couple times a year, but that may or may not happen. That may not happen at the right time. This is something we can do now. And other potential ways to deal with it are in the future. Right now, we have to prevent more nitrogen going into the system than there is now. There's too much now. So that's my answer to that. Any other questions from the board? Yes.
Paul Santos, Windy Way. Question with regard to, has there been any discussion with regard to limiting, between the different zones, Zone A, Zone B, as opposed to the entire watershed? I know Nantucket watershed section doesn't limit between, it's an entire global within Zone A and Zone B. Was there any discussion on limiting it to Zone A? And the other question would be, I'm assuming a innovative alternative bedroom credit would also be limited. That would that not be allowed within, with regard to the bedroom counts within the Hummock Pond watershed?
Not for increasing bedroom size. Or
So,
no,
just kind of
bedroom
give it- So in
numbers.
the public well recharge, we were allowed to use the bedroom credit. I think we've held the Nantucket protected watershed protection district, you can't use the bedroom credit for IA system. That would also fall.
That would apply here also.
Yes.
Then I guess the question would be, the Zone A, Zone B, whether there's any discussion on limiting it to Zone A.
There was minimal discussion about it. I don't think we ever came to conclusion.
If I
on
could
that.
bring up the next map, please. One of the things I looked at here was what impact sewer has on Zone B. The area that you see in the hash marks is either currently or proposed to be areas that would receive sewer shortly. Now, it's not a big area. It is, again, just this area here, excluding this, although there's no dwellings in here, this area here and this area here. We've got development all along through here. It really does not impact the developed areas at all at this point. It will someday, but not now, which is why I wrote the regulation to include both areas. This is certainly an option that the board can consider. I have, in anticipating that question, I have drawn up two sets of regulations, one which includes both A and B, and one which simply addresses the issue within Zone A.
Do you have a map that displays the plan for the town to go out to the head and over to Mattocket,
A plan of what?
the sewer expansion?
I do not.
May I ask? How we could make a regulation without having a forward plan as part of our commitment?
That plan is being promulgated. There are draft views of that plan that are not for public because they're ever-changing. And when that final determination is made shortly, that plan will become available. But right now, it's a work in progress.
Right, and it may be several years before whatever plan is adopted actually puts sewers in the ground.
Even so, it's several years before build-out happens in this area, and then particularly well put by everyone here is that perhaps, and I would venture to say 60% of this land mass shown in this map is virtually unbuildable. Okay? I'm talking Ram's pasture, right? The whole half of that map is virtually unbuildable, am I correct?
At the current time, yes.
Okay. Do you know the actual amount of unbuildable land in that map?
Personally, no.
Who does know this, that's on this board that's making this recommendation?
That determination may come from the planning department. This is done as a stopgap measure. This,
I'm not questioning it. I understand what you're saying, and I'm saying to you, if I'm looking to stopgap something, and you're looking at Nantucket, and you're looking at Monomoy, and you're looking here, and you're saying to yourselves, okay, how much building can I have here? So you say to yourself, okay, 40% of this is definitely buildable. Okay, you've got Audubon in there, you've got Land Bank, you've got Ram's pasture. You're passing a law that means nothing to any of those areas. Am I correct?
Two areas that aren't buildable, but there's a lot of potential area to expand, and that's where we would,
Including perhaps Bartlett Farm.
It's,
I mean, I don't know what the actual regulations are there.
it's out of the Zone B.
it's out of the zone, yeah.
But there are some,
Part of it's in it, right?
none of it's in it.
That's not Bartlett Farm.
That's the property line is pretty much the Zone B. And then the rest, it goes right down, and then it's Powers property. The farm's not in it.
What's the other side of that line? What's that?
That's,
The brewery?
The
Yeah.
farms, northern portion of the farm, that's all.
you talked about this area.
yeah, that
Yeah.
part, that's in but you have the restriction. Yeah, that's not, none of the part that they work out of the farm.
So the farm is.
Yeah, right here, the
Not
property
in.
goes right through, and
I
then
mean,
where they,
or the land that is in part of the farm is not available for building.
right,
You could do 2 additional buildings.
outbuildings, yeah.
Marty, this is not a great deal of math involved with this, to be honest with you. This is a simple situation where we have been given a TMDL for the pond. We know what that needs to be. It's way more than what it needs to be to clean that pond up. Any more nutrient loading is going to make it worse. This is a stopgap measure to keep that from happening until we can address the wastewater removal for the area.
So then, is there going to be a limit and a relief clause in this?
Or what?
A limit for what?
So let's say that, like you said, this is to stopgap, okay? Meaning that there's a period of time that you're looking to preserve, okay? What is that period of time? Where's the limit on this suggestion here? Item number 2, okay? Someone comes in and says, lower my fine, and you say no. That's okay. Let's say that you meet a criteria, and a simple criteria that can be legally met, not a criteria that is not achievable. And you allow, or even a percentage for growth, a percentage for the normal fact that if someone has 2 kids, they want to put a house in their backyard for their kids, they're allowed to do that in this town. And where is that addition to this where we're supporting community? And we're not doing this at the hazard to the pond. We're doing this at the fact that the project is moving forward, sewer is coming, we have all good faith in all items. Is that built into this?
It's a simple explanation. Until sewer is available to the property, you get 1 bedroom for every 10,000 square feet of property area and 2 people in that bedroom.
So you're saying that, no, there is no plan for the end-all sewer is coming dates. There is no plan for helping the people of Nantucket. There is no plan for saying to ourselves, we've got to do something about this. Let's put a close date on making this happen.
Well, I'll answer.
That's what the health department is saying?
Now, wait a minute.
I, go,
I'm just listening.
well,
Okay.
I would say, Richard, comment, I'll comment, then we have one more comment up there. That's how we'll do it.
We all know that sewer is not a defined entity right now. However, the town is working aggressively on establishing sewered areas to protect groundwater and water bodies for this island, all of them. Do we have a defined date? July 18th, 2021?
I'll take it.
It ain't it. You're not going to get it. You will get a progress report at some point from the consultants to the Board of Selectmen with regard to areas that are going to be sewered. Some of it you may see at the next town meeting, but that is certainly not a guarantee. We are working aggressively to do this in the shortest amount of time allowed to us by the federal government and the state government.
You bring up that point, and it's a good point.
I liked it.
Allowed to be by the government.
Well,
There's a timeline here that I think that the town has a responsibility to individuals to meet, and I think that the opportunity for people to work with the town to make this timeline accelerate is a distinct possibility. If you bring up the opportunity that somebody wants to put in a grandmother's apartment, in this ruling, they couldn't do that. They just didn't have the room on their lot. Maybe they have a half-acre lot, and they've already got a 4-bedroom house.
That's right.
They can't do it.
That's right.
But grandma needs somewhere to live, and this is Nantucket. And she can't keep her house anymore, and whatever. But now, where is the opportunity where that person has the opportunity to give to the sewer fund a certain amount of money that gives them a credit to get grandma's house with the absolute agreement that there's money coming down the street. I just did the sewer plan for my street. It's $86 a foot to put in the pipe that the town required. 86 bucks a foot. I have a 100-foot front yard. Okay? $9,000 to get sewer across my front yard to the house next door. Really? Right across the 100 feet. Where is, so if you've made it $10,000, where is the opportunity to create growth with the project and meet the needs of the people in Nantucket? I think that this needs to be built into this proposal for success.
I think
And
you're...
I'm not-
I think we'll move on a bit. I understand what you're saying, and I think that's an issue for you perhaps to push people on the sewer issue. Our responsibility, and you talked about the needs of the people of Nantucket, one of our responsibilities is the health, the environment of this island, and that's what we're dealing with now. If I knew that the sewer was going to come in next year, I might think maybe we don't need this. But for all I know, if it's going to be a year, it's going to be 10 years, I don't know. We have to get the nitrogen load down. Question back there, comment.
Thanks. Cormac Collier from the Nantucket Land Council. I definitely support the proposal. I'd even go so far that I would hope to see that both zones are included. I worked with the folks at doing the Mass History report and their land use analysis. And most of the growth, yes, there's a lot of conservation land in here, but most of the growth is in Zone B, and that's your potential for increased septic and increased nutrient loading into the ponds. I also want to support this bridge gap solution, although I understand that for that B, we don't necessarily know where the bridge is going to end in time, but I strongly support you guys doing something now in the immediate term. For one simple fact is that the more nitrogen that goes into this pond, the more internal loading in the future will occur. So that means the more that the algae and the plant growth feed on this nitrogen, the more they grow, the more they settle to the surface of the pond, the more that the sediments can contribute to the internal loading. So doing something now is actually very important versus doing something in 2020. So again, I would support the concept of adding it to both zones. I think as you address this in the future, working with the CWMP, the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan, that is going to have specific areas of the island as nitrogen-sensitive zones that may or may not be sewered, but they're going to have septic management plans or drafts of them working towards them that you can apply this regulation to and fine-tune it. But in the immediate term, I definitely think this is important. I support you guys.
Thank you. Does the board want any more information from the public?
Richard, what,
Then we'll leave the hearing open for the time being.
what is the effect, percentage-wise, if we just vote on A?
I wouldn't be prepared to comment on that right now, because I haven't done that particular
I
matter.
don't think there's, couldn't tell you that.
Do we know how much
Well, I mean, you
developed
just
land
heard
that
that
it's
this
going to
area here-
affect?
You've just heard that this area here is potential for the most increasing growth.
Right.
So if you increase that growth with no restrictions at all, you're just going to add additional nutrient loading to that pond.
And you already have a fair amount of development up at the top, which is the most
Yes,
badly
exactly.
damaged area.
And
Right.
this is a fair amount of development here. There's obviously some development around the edge of the pond. This is the most impaired portion of this pond right here.
It decreases as you go
Yes.
south and
As
increases.
you move south, it decreases. Certainly, the water quality is much better here
Then
than
up.
it is here, than it is here. It's horrible here.
Right.
Has Aquatech done a analysis of this with a pond management program? Is this board looked into pond water management as a realistic solution to water quality here?
Well, there's a lot of recommendations. One is to open the pond to the ocean at least twice a year at the right time and do it correctly. Will help a great deal. But that hasn't happened yet, and that's not guaranteed to always work. So that's part of the general pond management.
No, I mean, there is a very good company in Massachusetts that is approved by the Concom on island for pond management. And one of the things that they do is a water quality analysis with a water quality approach. So you say to me, open the pond, I get that. I mean, we all know it works. On Nantucket, that's for sure. That pond, virtually trapped, right? They were skating like crazy last week over there, it was great. But an aeration filter system, perhaps 2 units, the most 3 with the square footage of that, would probably turn that thing into wonderful, vibrant water. It's the fact of what it is, as a kennel hole, as what it is. So the results that we get, the steps that we make, could be $125,000 removed compared to sacrificing the opportunity for Nantucket families, as well as the reality of, if there is an approach to the possibility of growth within this area. And Richard, what does the 10,000 square feet reduce the opportunity for growth in this area by?
Again, that's a planning question. I don't profess to have that answer.
So how did you come up with that number if you don't know what the percentage of reduction is?
That number is derived via Title V. It is an equation within the state code,
State code.
That's the state code. We're fixed with that.
which we're bound by.
Right, well, it is quote a magic math that we have.
I wouldn't,
You know,
your
you
statement,
know,
not mine.
It seems to me that there are several questions that are, and I met with Richard to talk about this, to have some idea about this opportunity. I'm in Zone B, I'm committed to knowing more about it. I'm equally looking for a solution approach to this issue, just like he was looking for a solution with ticks. Percentages. I had a herd 13. I allowed hunting on my land. I'm down to 5 deer.
Marty, we are all in this. We're all doing what you're doing. We're all looking for the solution. The solution may arrive in due time. I hate to put a time limit on it that says due time. There's no 5 years, 3 years, 3 years, 2 years. Once we start considering sewer for that area, and it is a consideration, the issue of nutrient loading for that pond will be relieved. In the interim, we cannot afford to allow additional nutrient loading of either of those water bodies, either North Head or Hummock Pond, because as debilitating as it is now, additional loading brought forth by running municipal water to these properties and allowing them to add bedrooms would so place us behind any form of remediation curve that we'd never get it cleaned up.
I don't know if that is true. You can't make a statement like that. I wouldn't make a statement like that.
The town's in the water business now. Let's face it, it's not a big deal. It's not understood by those who have thought about it.
Well,
We've got to sell the water we have here, and the water was made because the water company was established because the water was so bad on Nantucket that people died. So now we're in the water business.
What?
well, let's move on. Get away from the water business. The facts are simple. Is that there are certain things. The pond has too much nitrogen. All right. Part of that comes from septic systems. There are 2 or 3 things that can be done. We can open up the pond, but it has to be opened up in the correct way at a certain time of year and all of that. And that may or may not happen at those times. That may or may not happen. Sewering, and that's going to happen, and how much that's going to reduce the load? It will reduce. It's like talking about ticks. It won't get it down to 0, but it'll make a lot of contribution. And the other one is preventing additional nitrogen, which this regulation 56 proposes. And that's what we need to do now, I believe. I don't know what, I've been speaking my opinion a little bit too much perhaps, but I don't know what the rest of the board
I
feels.
actually don't disagree with you.
Well, so let us, if the public has no more things to add to this, then I would propose we close the public hearing and discuss it. So I need a motion to close the public hearing.
Okay. I'm
Any further discussion? All in favor? Fine. The public hearing is closed.
Okay,
Discussion of the board.
I have some questions. You say if we could open the ponds twice a year like they should be opened, that would reduce a lot. My question to you is, why can't we do that on time?
Well, I believe the Board of Selectmen are going to do that this year.
So we can say that those ponds will be opened when they should be opened?
I can't say that.
Well, we have to be able to say something.
That's something that's out of our hands, Jim. That rests in the hands of the Conservation Commission and the Board of Selectmen.
I know the Board of Selectmen is very interested in doing that, and it was a strong recommendation of this group that did the study.
Well-
Now, when it happens, where it happens, if it's done right, I can't tell you that.
Well,
It's like I can't tell you when sewers.
Well, okay, but my question is, if we're going to make a huge decision like this, I think that we should be able to get some serious things from the town saying, okay, do this, and we will open the ponds when they should be opened. We will make sure that if you guys are trying to make this decision to basically close off this huge piece of land, they should have a responsibility to help us reduce all that the problem by opening the ponds when they should open them.
I believe that they are looking favorably upon doing that.
I believe that they're very committed to do that.
Yes.
My understanding of talking to them or the selectmen that were present when this report was presented, we certainly seem quite favorable to that. And I suspect it will happen, but again, I can't guarantee you that.
You guys don't make a recommendation of that?
Well, that's our recommendation to do it. I mean, yes, we can make that recommendation. It was the recommendation of everybody in the room.
The recommendation has been made on the part of the estuaries group. They have recommended that the town open the pond on a scheduled basis, looking at weather conditions and things of that nature. And they have recommended that a weir be placed between North Head of the Hummock and Hummock Pond.
But for the public health of the pond, isn't the priority, if this priority is focused around our water estuaries, shouldn't the health department be making a strong recommendation?
Well, the Board of Health will make a strong recommendation to support the recommendations of the estuary group, which were to open the pond twice a year and to put a weir in. So I think we can go on record, and I don't think anyone here will object to it, that the Board of Health unanimously recommends and supports that. And the question is, what else can we do? And that's what the discussion is.
Richard, my other question is, if we restrict all the building on that side, will the pond take care of itself?
I don't know that it won't make it any worse. And that's what we're trying to do right now. We're trying to not make it any worse. We're not trying to make it better. We're trying not to make it any worse. And if you add bedrooms to there, which municipal water would allow that to happen,
Well, let me
and that's
ask.
more effluent going to the pond, that would make it worse.
Okay. Let me ask a question. If we vote to do that, there are still people that can build in there and still have one bedroom every 10,000 feet, and you're going to get more in there.
But they can do that by right. The reason this is done, one bedroom for every 10,000 square feet, it has been determined that 10,000 square feet of unconstructed upon property has enough rainfall to mitigate nutrient loading for one bedroom. They balance each other out. As much effluent that's going into the ground from the septic system, the 10,000 square feet of property area that has nothing built on it will mitigate that and bring it to kind of a zero. But if you have 6 bedrooms and only 40,000 square feet, you've got 2 bedrooms there that are being not taken care of. And that's extra effluent going into the pond. Doesn't balance out. We are looking to create and maintain a balance. That's all we're looking to do on a temporary basis now.
This regulation
So, yep.
will not reduce the nitrogen load.
Right.
It will
But-
prevent it
but-
from getting worse.
My question is, it's not temporary. Because if the sewer doesn't go out to Hummock Pond for 20 years, basically it's forever.
Conjecture, but yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I add this? Science comes to specific conclusions. He said it with his deer thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was very eye-opening for me listening to that. So we put this regulation in there. The pond, they did a study in 07, then 10 and 12. It's a short period of time, 5 months. They don't study the pond, take water samples all year. which you would think you should do, and you're gonna base all this on a short period of time. This does affect a lot of people who actually have town water now, but don't have the sewer, you know, on a half-acre lot. And I know where some of them are, that you're basically cutting the value of their property in half. They just haven't decided to do anything with the property right now. Lots of it in Zone B are in agriculture, because so the people right now don't pay the taxes on it, but they get the town water. Some of these lots are in half-acre zoning. They're half-acre lots,
which is 2 bedrooms.
Right.
without putting an alternative, you can get
In
3.
reality, my lot is 39,996 feet. I got a 3-bedroom
Right.
lot.
I'm more concerned with like maybe the A part where that concentration of houses are right on the pond.
Ain't right here?
Yep,
Yeah.
right.
I mean, the other side of the street, town water's already there on Nantucket Road.
Right, and
Maxie
that's-
Pond Road.
Right,
But if you take these houses
at the very
at
top.
the very top, this is the most polluted section of the pond.
Right.
Actually, these houses here are closest to the less affected area.
Right, well, we're trying to base this on, they base this on, did you read the report?
I read all 115
So did I.
pages,
Yeah,
and I
so
went
that-
to the presentation.
I was away, I wish I could have been here. It's, the controllable things, yes, septic, but they're presuming. It's presumed.
Well, science is not always perfect, although
They
this is...
base it on their best scientific method.
Right. And this is a lot of this is what's called modeling. And if modeling is done correctly with the correct assumptions, it's sometimes the best you can do.
Their best guess.
And I don't know it's the best guess. I think this is the best you can do. You can't measure the water every day, and you can't do it every year. You have to make a model of it.
Right, so what I was gonna get at, we put this in there, and this regulation's in there for 15, 20 years. The study of the pond should keep going. What if the numbers don't get it better or they get worse? And then what are you gonna tell people?
I think the study of the pond should keep going, and in fact, we'll have to do that. Because you're right. There's no sense doing anything unless you have an outcomes measure.
Right.
But until there's adequately drainage and opening of the pond, until there's sewers, you're not going to see great changes. Without this regulation, we potentially could see worse.
Well, with this regulation, you're taking people's property rights away.
My problem is it's a tremendous amount of land that you're saying, we're just gonna take this out of the, we're just gonna take this away.
Well, maybe that would be impetus to get some sewers out there.
But it is, but what I'm saying is you're gonna take all this away and you don't even know if the pond is gonna get better or not. I could see if you were gonna say, after 5 years, by passing this pond will be better, it'll be clear as a bell, it'll solve
say that.
some of our problems.
It's not going to make it worse. Other more major things have to be done to the pond to make it better. What this does is helps and will reduce the additional nitrogen from going in the pond, so it won't get worse. I think we have to be careful. This regulation in itself will not make the pond better. It will help it from getting worse. There's other things that have to be done that are out of the control of this board to make it better. And that's sewering and opening up the pond.
Paul?
Yeah, go ahead. We're just talking.
Yeah, I know, you're just talking now. So, I mean, the watershed is the watershed, so there's really no, I mean, from what I'm hearing, Zone A is really no different than Zone B. It's all on water.
Zone A is an arbitrary line drawn 1,000 feet from the edge of the water, of the pond.
That being said, is the compromise the allowance of IA technology for, I mean, you can get 1 bedroom per 10,000 with a conventional system. You'd be allowed, well, let's say 4 bedrooms per acre. You would be allowed 6 bedrooms getting the protection, but the people would have at least the option to get the extra bedrooms, realizing that they have to put in a higher quality
Exactly.
system.
Yeah.
You know, maybe that's an alternative rather than just saying the bedroom is 1 per 10,000, no IA technology allowed.
Well, we're not throwing IA out.
It doesn't, not that I read, I didn't see that it was in there.
Well, I think it's kind of
That it was
implied.
but there were options, that there were opportunities. that
So
you-
basically, you're saying, Richard, with 1 acre, you can have 6 bedrooms?
But
Well,
you have
that's
to put
the-
an IA
With an alternative
That's
design
the
system.
rule now.
Right.
Yeah, so it's not changing the
not
rule.
Game's off if the water, you have water. And that's the point.
Okay. One more comment.
Yeah, it just seems that yes, there might be a compromise here that wouldn't restrict anybody's property rights except for they would have to, true, they'd have to put in some additional money for an IA system, and that you have X amount of load for a 4-bedroom system on 40,000 square feet. If you put in an IA system for 6 bedrooms, presumably the load is going to be reduced compared to the 4 bedrooms. So I think there's a way you can do it through your waiver process. I'm not very familiar with your waiver process, but I imagine if the onus would be on the applicant, the person who wants to build that 6-bedroom system on 40,000 square feet, where they would work with the board, and the board would say, hey, you have basically the science behind you. Your X load is going to be reduced.
Yeah.
Versus your
Well,
4
how about the
bedroom.
6-bedroom on the half-acre lot? Because I got town water, but I'll put an IA in if I hire Paul to design a system.
For me, if the load is reduced, at the end of the day,
Yeah.
the load is reduced, the load is reduced. And I think the onus would be on the applicant to show that the total load is.
This regulation is written in such a way that it does not address the IA component that's allowed in the area. And it does it by, there's a reason for that. We would simply follow the state's guidelines for IA systems. In other words, within all of these zones, if you've got a 40,000 square foot lot, you could have 6 bedrooms on it, but you would have to go to the extra cost of putting in an IA system.
So that can be done
We do that
all the time.
with the stroke of a pen. That's the stroke of a pen in my office.
Not on a half acre, no.
No, well, that's what
No,
I'm asking that.
on a half-acre lot, you would probably gain you get 3 bedrooms on a half-acre lot.
The normal, half-acre, essentially.
Right.
Okay.
Well,
We're doing that
what
now.
I'm saying is you have a lot there on Hummock Pond Road. I'm just saying, say if you had another one, half-acre lot, you have town water. You haven't decided to build on it. You had a plan to do something. You had a 6-bedroom already designed, you haven't put it in yet. We just take that away from you. Put
Well,
that
we've
right in.
reduced it to 3.
That's what I'm hearing.
I just paid $750 $1 million for your lot.
Yeah.
Now, I hired Jim, I'm gonna sell it. Oh, Regulation 56 is in. Nobody's gonna give you $1 million for your half-acre lot.
Which is why I'm saying that if there's an incentive to meet the ultimate goal of sewer in this, and an IA is an excellent, alternative or an additional alternative, but where is the true answer for the health board? It's sewer.
Well, I have to agree with you to a point. I think I would vote for this if there was a drop-dead date that said 5 years from the day this thing goes into effect, if the sewer is not proposed or in the works or something like that, then this thing would go away.
Yeah, I'm in the business, but I'm all for extending the mains to where they need to go. But your biggest fight is going to be with. You think land council wants you to extend sewer mains everywhere? Game's off then.
Well, it's going to happen.
We haven't fought a sewer extension in quite some time.
I would.
We used to, I'll grant you, we used to. but
Yes.
Since I came in,
I
But
wouldn't.
you're
I wouldn't.
you're pushing for this regulation based on a pond study that is only been for 2010 and 2012. It's flawed. It's It's basically 56 is a building cap in disguise.
No way around it.
And I don't wanna make,
Doesn't seem
I
to
can't
solve
consciously
our
make a
conscious
decision like that and have something come back on us, you know?
Richard, is there a way that we can put a date in this?
Not tonight.
No.
It has to be forever.
Well, it won't
No,
be,
the regulation can be rescinded at any time. However, the date you're looking for is when sewer gets out there. That rests in the hands of the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Sewer Commissioners, who are the same people, and the consultants.
all right.
And usually, the sewer extensions are left up to the private sector. The town should be in the business of extending the lanes, and doing abatements. They should, in a sensitive area, then,
So you're saying we can't change this? We can't put a date in there saying that this is in effect until January the 1st, 2020?
Oh, you could certainly do that if you'd like, yes.
We could do it. I'm not comfortable with it, but we could do it.
Vote at town meeting.
It'll get voted here today or postponed, whatever we decide to do.
You have to postpone this.
Why?
Are you kidding me?
there's nobody here.
There's nobody here. If he hadn't have told me, I wouldn't have been here. And the only reason he told me is because I walked into his office.
It's going,
I'm
it's too
checking the paper
fast.
every day.
Regulations have
Today's
been in the
agenda
paper.
doesn't even say it's on it.
The regulations have been in the paper for 2 weeks.
Where?
In the paper.
In the paper.
The normal American way. We put something up in little print for 2 weeks and tell the people in Nantucket, this is what's going to happen to your land.
It's big print. All right, listen.
I don't even read the paper.
This is-
you know?
Okay, all right.
Unacceptable.
All right, I think we're just going to go around in circles again. We have options here. We can pass this as it's written. We can amend it and do it for just Zone A or Zone B, or we could continue the discussions. I'll be frank, and I'm not sure continuing the discussions is going to add more information to it. This is the information we have. It's just not going to, I'm not going to get any more information by continuing it. But those are the three choices that we have from the board, 4 choices.
Those are good options, I think. And what they really point out is that your last point, you have a lack of information that allows you to make. a
Well, see, I respect, I disagree with that. I'm not going to get more information about the nitrogen loading in the pond. I'm not going to get any more information about the potential of a sewer, because that, I don't know, so I,
Are really.
well, no. All right, enough. Actually, I technically closed the public hearing, but I like to speak to people, all right? So we can adopt it, we can amend it to only one zone, or if you're uncomfortable, we can I can reopen the hearing and continue it to the next meeting. I personally don't think that's going to help us. I think we have to bite the bullet and either vote for it, not vote for it, or amend it. I don't know your opinions.
Can you put a couple of years on it? I mean, can you say that we're going to do the regulation for Zone A and B until 2016? I mean, would that be helpful?
Oh, we can certainly do
We
that.
can do that, but we're going to have to be very well aware, if any of us is still here in 2016, that it doesn't slip by and not slip by. That's my concern.
My personal opinion is by putting a date on it, I think it puts some pressure on the town to get the sewer line.
Well, you'll certainly know, we'll have the sewer report
Okay,
well
listen.
before 2016.
I'm getting to get a sense that we have a consensus that this might be acceptable to the board if we put some date on it.
It is as far as I'm concerned.
So,
Is it? Are you
Yes.
And what does the date do?
all right with put a date on it?
That it, expires after that?
yeah, it
Yeah,
expires after.
absolutely.
It fixes
Yeah,
a date.
sunset date.
Set a date. So if you want to propose a date and you can make we'd have to vote on an amendment to it first, so you could propose an amendment that it expires in some date, 16, 15,
Yeah,
18?
16.
16, that's 2 years.
What?
17 or 18?
Well,
Well, let me ask you a question. Let's say it expires in 2016. Can we, as a Board of Health, come back?
Oh, you can change the
Yeah.
expiration date at any time.
We could change the date,
Sure.
we could rescind.
No,
the-
but I mean, I don't want to change the date. If we say 2016 now, I don't want to come back next year and say we're changing the date.
I think it's a little premature. I think the date is going to be dependent upon when we can get sewer out there.
Yeah, and this is 14, I don't think 16, by the time, if we did say 18, all right? That fixes a date that's kind of reasonable of an expected time of a sewer. And then if the sewer magically appears before that, we can rescind this.
Well, my whole answer to that is, if the town says, oh, we don't have to do sewer till 16, okay, then if we say we put in 18. They say, okay, we got until 18. If you put in 2020, they'll say, we got to 2020.
Yeah, that's the downside of a date, is it puts off other people making decisions.
That's right. It puts the town off from getting their act together and trying to get the sewer there when, yeah, I mean, that's a huge chunk of land.
This is Bex.
I know, I've heard you. Public part's closed. This is for the board to work our way through this. So
Stephen,
that's,
you all right with the date?
I'm not even really all right with that.
well, you have a
I'm
re-
just-
vote,
That's
whatever you
how
wish.
I'm not gonna vote to
Okay.
put that in, that regulation right now. I think it's too fast, we haven't had enough people. Nantucket was different, they had almost 2 years, they met during the summer, the people met in the winter, everybody was involved out there. That's what they wanted.
I sent out an email to 147 people today, yesterday. I got 2 responses. Only one of them even knew what I was talking about. They're all locals.
Comments over here? You want a date? You want us to continue?
well, I mean, that was my suggestion. I hoped it would help the discussion, and I hoped it would give us some leeway and certainly learn more about what the plans for the sewer are, which, I mean, this committee hasn't been meeting for nothing. I'm talking about the sewer committee in the town. They're coming up with a plan. It gives us at least a couple of years or 3 years, whatever we want to do, to hear that plan and then either rescind or not. I just thought it would give us a little wiggle room.
A date, I personally think a date doesn't matter, because we can extend this, rescind it, whatever we want to.
Well, I didn't know if it made people more
Well,
comfortable.
I don't want to vote for it without a date. I
Okay.
don't want to just say, that's it.
So we have someone, all right. Helene, your sense?
My sentence.
You want to?
If you don't want a
Yes,
date.
no, I do want a date.
You want a date. So we have 2 that want a date, 1 that doesn't want anything, and 1 that doesn't want a date. That's an interesting. So what we will do then, we will take motions. And the motions could be to accept it as, the motion could be to reject, to not approve it, or the motion could be to amend it with a certain date.
Well, do we have another one? Could we vote to pass A?
You could, you can do that. You can amend it to have just A, you can amend it to have a date, you can vote as is, or you can vote to reject it. So there's 4 possible things, and we need
Can we
motion.
vote for A and also vote to continue it?
to con-
Continue the B section? Not vote on that.
We could do whatever you want, depending on what motion you make. So in other words, we can vote to accept it as is. We can vote to reject it as is, or you can make various amendments. You can make amendment for just A, amendment for just B, amendment for a date, amendment for a date in one and date for another, any combination.
I'd be okay with A, but not the.
I don't have a problem at all are we all in consensus that we would vote for A, four of us?
I think we.
All right, can that be part of the vote?
Well-
Well, I make a motion, no, it's not on this whole thing. I'm not making a motion on the whole thing, that we pass one and not pass the other one. I want to take A out and make a motion that we will vote, I make a motion that we vote on section A,
A with a date or without a date?
without a date.
Okay, so we have an amendment, so you're going to propose an amendment that we accept A without a date.
Without a date.
Let me read that amendment back to you. Properties located within Zone A of the Hummock Pond Watershed Protection District as identified on a map entitled Hummock Pond Watershed Nantucket GIS as dated July 1st, 2010, and connected to a municipal water service shall not be exempt from compliance with Section 56.02A of these regulations. And that basically says all properties within Zone A, if they connect to town water, municipal water, they still cannot exceed their bedroom count by one bedroom for every 10,000 square feet.
So we have.
Except with an alternative system.
Right.
Right. So the motion, that's the motion that's
That's the
made.
motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now,
Could I get you all to sign that?
no, we haven't finished yet.
No, that's for A.
That's an amendment.
Okay.
Now, we can now make an amendment to cover B, which could have a date, which could be rejected. Does anyone want to make an amendment in regards to Zone B?
Wait a minute, you said with a date that could be rejected, meaning what?
Oh, we could say B won't be included in the regulation.
Okay.
Or we can make an amendment that B has a certain deadline on it. You can make an amendment to that. Anyone?
Stephen,
I'm not. I want to keep it out.
Okay.
we'll make a motion. You make a motion?
Well, do you,
Is that what you're doing?
No, that's how I feel now until we.
okay.
How do you feel?
I would just as soon keep everything as is, but I will go with,
What do you mean as is?
I would just.
Both A and
Oh,
I
you would
just-
put them both in?
I'd put
How
it
do
in
you
B,
feel?
but that doesn't,
Huh?
I'm just a voice of one, I'm not everyone. So what do we want to do with B?
I'm not going to vote for B unless I get a date.
So why don't you propose an amendment that says that Zone B will have, the regulation will expire in Zone B on blank.
Okay. Before I do that, I want to know why you don't want to vote if there's a date.
It's going to affect, that affects people right now,
Yeah.
whatever years you put on it. Yeah.
Actually, it does matter how many years.
All right, just, let's, all right, Helene can make a motion
You can make a motion.
That
that Zone B is
Zone B is
included
included.
through a certain date, or Zone B is included.
Okay, so until-
Actually, we have to have Zone B with a date because the amendment we approved is for Zone A. So that would exclude Zone B. So if we include Zone B, we're going to have something different about Zone B.
2016.
All right.
I would write a second section for Zone B.
You can
Well,
vote.
we're going to make an Helene, then is, your amendment
Okay.
is that Zone B is included in the regulation, all right, until 2016, like June of 2016. Do I have a second?
Before, can I say something?
You can say
before that?
anything you want. This is important.
Okay. Can we, what happens if we vote not to do anything with B? Can we continue to talk about it and
Yes.
discuss it?
Yes.
And come back?
We have the option to vote on your amendment, which essentially is only includes Zone A.
Right.
And then I can open the public hearing again for Zone B and discuss it later. Which means we don't take a vote on Zone, we essentially are tonight only voting on Zone A, and we'll continue to discuss Zone B.
What the official process would be to endorse and accept Zone A this evening.
Yes.
With all of the parameters within the regulation.
Right,
Right.
okay.
Should you wish to address Zone B at a future date, you could amend these regulations.
Right.
It would be a separate public hearing and a separate process, but we certainly can do
Right.
that too.
Right now, the amendment that's been approved to the regulations only includes Zone A.
Okay.
So we could vote now on that and not have it, and not talk about Zone B at all, because Zone B, by that amendment, is essentially taken out of the regulations.
Okay.
We could do that. So if you're comfortable with that, then we need a motion to pass the regulation as amended.
And B's not in it at all?
Is not in
I'll
it.
make that motion.
Second.
Second.
Further discussion? All right, all in favor of the amended regulation, which essentially says the regulation holds for Zone A only and not Zone B, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Chairman votes aye, so it is unanimously carried. The Regulation 56 is approved, amended to include only Zone A. And if at a later date we want to include Zone B, we will discuss it.
Thank you all. Very good. I think this is a great opportunity for you. Thank you for coming, and I understand your concerns. We
All right.
appreciate involvement.
Public hearing, draft local regulations 65. This is IA tracking regulations. We've discussed this several meetings. Can you summarize it in 2 minutes?
Yes.
No more.
This is essentially a regulation that would mandate tracking be initiated for all IA systems installed in Nantucket. It is a tracking system offered by Barnstable County. It is not up and running yet, but they are asking towns to pass this regulation so that when it is up and running, which is very shortly, we can notify all of the engineers and designers that they need to log in specific information with Barnstable County. They will get the phone number as to who to call, as to what to log in. It is free of charge now. There was going to be a charge with this. It is now free of charge. Took us a while to negotiate that, but we did. The good news is DEP in the new Title V has modified that in Title V to say all septic systems now within the state of Massachusetts shall be electronically tracked. And it looks like Barnstable County is going to be the tracking agent. This is a great boon to us. This allows IA systems who have maintenance contracts to not slip between the cracks. We have just dealt with one that did. We've remediated the situation and taken care of it, but it was long and somewhat arduous for both the department and for the property owner, but it is done. This is a defined positive thing no matter how you look at it.
Good.
Okay, public hearing is open. Is there anyone to discuss Regulation 65? Yes, sir. Come down and give your name, please.
My name is Peter Brace, and I'm the secretary for the Shellfish Bylaw Review Board. We have a at 6 o'clock.
We will be out very shortly. Sorry, Peter, we ran a little over.
Hearing no public comment, the public session is closed. Do I have a motion to accept or reject Regulation 65?
Motion to accept.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I will have a signature sheet for you available.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. In lieu of the fact that we're being thrown out, I will suspend the director's report.
And we have one more issue, though, at number 6.
Number 6,
Quick vote.
Yeah.
loan application.
It's a loan application for the replacement of a failed septic system at Green Meadow Drive. The system costs are $35,000. We have all of the appropriate paperwork. We simply need board approval and the signature of the chairman, which he would have to go to the health department to do.
Green Meadow, that's down off of my comment?
Yes.
Off my comment.
Yep.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the loan or reject the loan?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the loan, aye.
Aye.
Chairman votes aye. Loan is approved. The director's report will hold off till next time.
Absolutely.
And having any further discussion, issues of the board, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Gave me a new idea with that one, Richard.
In
What?
Both 56 and 65 are effective
A, now.
Yes.
today, tomorrow.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. Thank you.
Then your land bank, 2% fee on all septic systems, and it goes to sewer.
Thank you, sir.
Agree to disagree.
Yeah, yeah.
Format,
Thank you
here.
very much.
I say 50% of all land bank,
Yes. Yeah, I kind of felt that was a
and the betterment of the island.
I wasn't going to push it because I would have lost.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. And yeah, okay, with age. Yeah. I'm just so excited about this, I could fill my shoes.
What does it mean to track the septic
In
system?
fact, I think I might have. What?
Tracking the septic system?
Yes.
What does that mean?
It means that alternative design systems, the special stuff to get more bedrooms, or if you're in tenuous ground,
Yeah.
what that means is, these systems have maintenance agreements that last a year, and they expire. We can't keep up with all of them, and we don't know if the owners have actually